Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, June 3rd, 2022. Time to wrap up the week. Are you ready? Good. I don't know. All right. Well, if you're getting ready for a fun weekend and you want to ruin it, you're in the right place. We'll tell you all the horrible, bad, terrible things that are going on that will, I don't know. Who knows? At this point, it might sustain you through the weekend at this point. Okay. Lots to wrap up, of course. I want to get back to a bunch of stories that I talked about earlier in the week, some of which I hinted at yesterday, some things to return to. Of course, some other things happened, as it turns out. They just keep going over and over again. Let's see. By the way, I saw a rumor somewhere, and I don't know whether somebody was just tweeting it to get everybody all riled up or not, but I have to check into this. Is it National Donut Day? Is that a day? I mean, I think they have that day, but I'm not certain when it is, or whether it moves around, for all I know. Yeah, Friday is National Donut Day. According to, I guess, the results on Google News, it's illustrated with this very factual-looking picture of Homer Simpson eating a donut. So, you know, you got to go with that. National Donut Day. Oh, well, here's a thing on where to find freebies, in case you're interested in that, and who wouldn't be. Where is this? The Democrat and Chronicle from where? This might just be freebies in Rochester. But, you know, maybe not. All right. Man. Rochester, you're in luck if you are interested in free Donut Day stuff. They've done some actual work here and collected some good-looking local places. There is, of course, Dunkin' Donuts, and it's a buy any beverage and get a free donut on Friday. That's good news. So just send me a check for that one, Dunkin' Donuts. Also, Tim Hortons, which is something you can actually find in Rochester, not just in Canada. And what's there to customers who register for a Tim's Rewards and buy a donut through the app online can unlock a free donut. Like, more hurdles to free donuts. Well, there's some local places probably should get your attention too. They require, look at this, Sonny's Donuts and Cafe. Pour gasoline over your head and light yourself on fire and you'll get a free, I'm just kidding. You don't have to do that. Sonny's Delight will offer a free donut with the purchase of a beverage, just like the big guys over at Dunkin'. But it will also serve two special creations, a patriotic donut that will shoot your family at a rally, I guess, I don't know, and a maple bacon donut, which obviously hates America. The maple bacon donut is not included in the special, so don't get too excited. I don't know. Anyway, it sounds fun. There's a nice picture of one of the local shops here. There's also a restaurant, I guess, the Red Fern. Every Friday is Donut Day at the Red Fern, it says. So, good. And now you can get one for free, possibly. The Ridge Donut Cafe also has something to, no purchase necessary. A free fried cake, as they put it, to each customer. No purchase necessary. It also released a new flavor, blueberry fried cake topped with zesty lemon icing. I would go for that. And their donuts look pretty good. Plus, they call them fried cakes, and you can't go wrong with that. Lastly, this beautiful picture that inspired me to actually take a look at this from Schutz, I guess? Maybe Schutz. Schutt apostrophe S. It's possessive. Schutz Apple Mill. That looks really good. And I don't know, they make apple cider donuts. What's up here? A fixture in Penfield for generations. Schutz Apple Mill will offer one. That's one. Free glazed cinnamon and sugar. Glazed, cinnamon and sugar. Or plain fried cake. Must be a Rochester thing. Fried cake to each of its visitors on Friday. And they look terrific. And you should go. And they're not even paying me for it. And I've never been to Rochester. So, or have I? Maybe I've been to Rochester. I may have gone to Rochester once, 35 years ago. I might have gone, is that Would I have gone there to go fishing on Lake Erie with my dad? My dad taking me fishing. My dad was taking my stepbrother, my younger, our half-brother. I know I have to sort this out. One of my brothers is what I usually say, and then I get emails. How many brothers do you have anyway? One of my half-brothers, he loved going fishing. So he was taking him salmon fishing, like on Lake Erie. Well, fun, right? So do you want to go along? Yeah, sure, absolutely. We might have gone to Rochester for that. I don't know whether that's right or not. I'll look it up later on to see if it's in the place I remember. Anyway, had I known, or had they, I guess they were around because there were generations of legendary donuts or whatever. I don't know. They look pretty delicious. If you're lucky enough to be in Rochester, you probably know all about it. If you are within driving distance of Rochester, I'd go there. Man, 1063 Plank Road in Penfield, opening at 9 a.m. That's now. Lake Ontario. Thank you, production staff. Okay, so they're near Lake Ontario. So if I went to Rochester and then I fished, it would be at Lake Ontario, not Lake Erie. And if you want a donut and you are, I don't know, you're flying over the Great Lakes and you parachute into Lake Erie to get one of these donuts, you're out of luck, dummy. You parachuted into the wrong lake. So get your donut-loving ass to Lake Ontario. I think that's right. I'm going to look at the map now. I'm very confused about all of this. But, all right, Rochester, New York, right? Yeah, Rochester, New York. I'm just looking to see if this could possibly be the place as I remember it. Let's see. Rochester on Lake Ontario, yes. Is that where I went? That's the big question. Can I get to Niagara Falls from there? Yeah. Okay, not far. It may have been that I flew to Rochester and then drove to somewhere and went fishing on Lake Erie, because we also visited Niagara Falls briefly in the evening. Or if you go to Rochester, Rochester is sort of right there on the shores of Lake Ontario. Why? I mean, I guess you would. What would you do if you wanted to go? If you were bound and determined to fish on Lake Erie, you could fly to Buffalo and do that, but an hour from there. Yeah, I mean, that's probably about right. I don't know. I can't remember this. I remember this part. We got on the boat. It was, and the salmon were these gigantic salmon, and we didn't manage to land any of them because, we didn't know what we were doing. And I think my dad was kind of seasick from things, a small boat. And I don't know. I did okay, but we got a salmon on the line, but we just didn't know what we were doing and couldn't land. And it was huge, too. And I should add, I don't eat salmon, so I don't know what we would have done with those stuff. But it would have been fun to land it. And I think if you boat one of these things, they're big enough that the captain of the boat will take you to one of the restaurants and they'll buy it off of you. So it doesn't go to waste. Or it might have been a catch and release thing, which it was for us, except for the catch part. We had the release thing down pat. So I don't remember which lake we actually fished in, but now I know which lake Rochester is on. Buffalo is on Erie. Congratulations. Get yourself a donut. I don't know how this happened, but 10 minutes. I love donuts. And you should too. I think that's the lesson. All right. Shoo. Well, what I didn't know was that we could have been talking about an alternative breakfast this whole time. Bill in Portland, Maine, not on any of the Great Lakes, as far as I can tell. They have some pretty good lakes in Maine, and he could tell you all about which ones are where. And is that where Lake Winnipesaukee is? I don't remember. I don't remember enough geography to know, but it sounds like a Maine sort of thing, and I'm pretty sure that people have mentioned it as such. Fantastic lakes, just not great, apparently. Donuts? You'll have to ask Bill. In the meantime, what were you supposed to eat for breakfast? I can tell you, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. It's 10 minutes of donut talk and salmon talk, which is another breakfast treat if you turn it into lox for your bagels. And the radio show's live now. And guess what? Kagro X, that's me, the guy talking about the donuts and the fish, reminds you that it's the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. That is true. My mom is in London at the moment now, Not because she's a royal attending the Jubilee, but she's on her way somewhere else. But it's a good time to stop in and check in on the Queen. So that's cool. And what more do you want to know about that? Well, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which I guess is 70 years on the throne? Crazy. So stop complaining and finish your breakfast haggis, you codgers, says Bill. Well, breakfast haggis, that's one alternative too. That doesn't sound that much better than donuts and fish, quite honestly. But let's see. Well, it's fun to know. All right, my mom, by the way, in London, texting this morning that she's just passing through my old neighborhood in London. I have a neighborhood, an old neighborhood in London. And in case you're in London, you can check it out. She couldn't get her phone out in time to take a picture of the Bayswater road signs for the corner of Queensway and Bayswater, and then sends me a picture of their map to prove that that's where they are. I'm not exactly certain why, but thanks, Mom. And yeah, that's my old neighborhood. If living there for 6 months counts as it being your old neighborhood. It was a study abroad thing, and it was fun, and we had a nice apartment. And if you're ever there, I lived on Leinster Terrace in I would say that's Bayswater area, but yeah, we were right in between Bayswater and Queensway tube stops. And I don't know what you would call the area, but I think Bayswater more so than anything else. And it was nice, lovely, fun. No donuts, no fish, no nothing. Comment from Justice here. Yeah, I think he's trying to say, get back on track and do a radio show. Canadians will have semi-autos to hunt the feral pigs for maple bacon donuts. Yeah. Oh, they won't have them. All right. Yes, that's true. They have the big gun ban is on. Or at least under consideration up there in Canada. They probably have to do some voting in their parliament and all that stuff. They do that stuff. They can't just listen to Trudeau's all the time and just do whatever they say. But yeah, lots of people here in the United States in our hearings. The Republican thing yesterday was to talk about all of the things you needed your AR-15 for. The Western House members insisting at the Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday that it is the gun of choice in their neighborhoods for shooting at foxes, raccoons, and I guess probably coyotes. People have talked about shooting their coyotes with them all the time. These guys didn't mention coyotes. They talked about raccoons and foxes. There were two Republican members who insisted that they were the gun of choice for protecting their chickens, which I don't believe they're actually raising. But their neighbors probably have chickens, and it might even be true. The question is whether it's the gun of necessity, not the gun of choice. I mean, it's their gun of choice because it makes them feel awesome when they do have to shoot at raccoons, but it's probably not the gun of choice for, well, if you have neighbors, it's probably unwise. Plus, I would gather that they probably shot a bunch of their chickens accidentally as well, but you can eat the evidence of that, so it's not quite as big a problem. I guess you could eat the raccoon too. I mean, if you're really into, which gun is best for shooting raccoons to save your chickens, you might not be, I don't know. Is it too snooty to say you're above eating raccoon? But anyway, I don't know why that's what they chose. It's what happens. I think they could probably handle it with another gun. They used to do it with shotguns. But now they can be, play cool army guy and pretend they're, fighting in Fallujah when they're just shooting at a raccoon, which really could be chased away with shotgun. 22 rifle would probably be smarter. Shotgun probably would shoot a lot of your chickens. But if it's Friday and you're looking for fried chicken, then go for it. AR-15 will likely ruin the chicken if you miss. So, all right. Who am I to give you advice? Anyway, Mighty OCD chimes in and says about the Canadian situation for hunting their feral pigs, which I don't think that's a huge problem in Canada, but in the southwestern United States, apparently it's a big deal. You all know the internet meme by now. I don't need to explain it. Mighty OCD says, maybe if they just ask nice, the pigs would share the donuts. I mean, they are Canadian pigs. That's true. They would be very sorry not to have donuts to share with you. I swear to God, there's other news But I thought the donut thing was a big deal. Let's go the opposite direction. Total opposite extreme. The Canadians love to do it themselves. Lots of Canadian snowbirds love to spend time in Florida. This despite the fact that it is governed by Ron DeSantis, and he continues to do horrible things way down yonder. Big news articles this morning, including one, he's actually sort of late to this party, but following the other Republicans, you have to do it. He's going to face them in debate at some point when he's running for president. He can't be the only governor up there to say that the last governor up there to say he finally got around to blocking transgender youth from transition-related therapies. So he's jumped both feet into that pool. I have seen lots of people talking about it. I happen to have the Hills piece in front of me now. As you know, they always tempt me by tweeting photos in their along with their stories, and that's just eye-catching. I had seen a couple of people mention it, and I put it aside. It's not a huge story in that we kind of know. You read the headline, you know what's going on. You had to figure that DeSantis was going to get around to this at some point. I put it in there in the queue. I knew I needed it in the queue really because I had already put another DeSantis story in, and I wanted to get to the other one first. But then I made a mistake, and I talked about donuts, and I got all turned around. But yes, here we are with him. Well, what's the procedural posture that we're in? The Hill story says the Office of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis this week encouraged the state's Board of Doctors to follow guidance, and it's not capitalized, Board of Doctors. What are they the board of? They are the Florida Board of Medicine. In the capitalized form, that must be their real name. Why they start in the first paragraph by saying the state's Board of Doctors, like a 5-year-old wrote this. I won't give you the name of the writer, not to embarrass them. Anyway, he encouraged this board to follow guidance from the DeSantis administration, well, duh, on transition-related therapies for transgender minors, which would limit or eliminate various hormonal, surgical, and other procedures. Okay, standard stuff in terms of authoritarian jerkiness for Republicans. State Surgeon General Joseph A. Ladapo, this is the COVID denier that he brought in, told the Florida Board of Medicine in a letter obtained by NBC News that his office found the science supporting these therapies, quote, extraordinarily weak. I don't know whether he's really in any position to say anything, given how extraordinarily weak his quote-unquote science has been on the COVID front, but this is exactly what you would expect out of them, and that's what they're doing. And I bring it up, like I said, because I had put aside another story about DeSantis, and I said if I mention this other story and I don't mention that he's also jumping on the anti-transgender treatment bandwagon, I will have been remiss. So now I'm not remiss. I'm just miss. So anyway, the other thing that I put in the queue here for DeSantis was that he is once again using the state apparatus to punish political enemies. Although I'm not too worried about this one in particular, but it's always worth monitoring him. Let's see. This time, Kip Jones reporting at Mediaite that DeSantis has vetoed funding for Tampa Bay Rays, a Tampa Bay Rays facility, over their tweets about gun control. According to this report, this is interesting construction of a headline. I guess Mediaite, not on the ground reporting in Florida necessarily, but talking about, a news aggregator is grabbing the story from elsewhere. So, for whatever reason, they are attributing it to the report, which is nice to do in the headline, but it comes down to being weird in the construction. DeSantis vetoes funding for Tampa Bay Rays facility over tweets about gun control, report. Okay, I get the idea. Kip Jones, whatever, man, or woman, or I don't actually know what Kip Jones, K-I-P-P. Sorry, Kip, but I didn't mean to gender you. I was just using man in the ignorant sense of leaving out an entire gender, plus people who are non-gender specific as well, who would, we got to work on the speech patterns. I'm old. I'm almost a boomer. Jeez. Anyway, Governor Ron DeSantis vetoed a budget item for a new practice facility for the Tampa Bay Rays over the team's recent tweets about gun control. You may remember that end of last week, Greg sent along, probably last Friday, the news that the New York Yankees, that day playing the Tampa Bay Rays, had decided not to, to use their satellite channel to broadcast the game, but instead to broadcast statements, facts about gun violence in the country, and the Rays had matched them on that. And I guess that got Ron DeSantis mad, which really shouldn't, but, he's performing for Republican reactionaries and looking to run for president. So he's going to say, I disagree with you about gun control, and so therefore I will veto a budget item for a new practice facility for you. On the one hand, hey, don't use the apparatus of the state and the muscle of state funding to punish people for speaking out on a widely popular issue. And remember, Greg also told us yesterday that they interviewed Trump voters in a diner, or whatever they call them, in Florida. They were eating, and it's called the Retirement Homes Cafeteria, probably, and asking them about gun issues, and that they were surprisingly in line with the rest of the country on most gun issues. And so what's the freaking problem? But remember, he's performing for the extremists, so he's going to veto this funding. On the other hand, who cares? Why should there be public funding for a Tampa Bay Rays practice facility anyway? Just use the ticket money and build the I know, but the finances of a baseball team are probably beyond me and whatever, and maybe they do need some assistance, or they could just say, maybe we use an old practice facility. We're doing just fine. I get the feeling that the owners are doing fine. The players are probably being paid pretty well, and I don't know. So anyway, I guess I'm just not too worried about the Tampa Bay Rays in this. But this is the news. The Florida Republican signed his state's new budget Thursday for the coming fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. NPR in Tampa Bay reported that Governor Ron DeSantis signed this $109.9 billion budget for the fiscal year. That's a big budget. But vetoed, I guess he's got a line item veto there in Florida. Other vetoes included funds for a Pasco sports complex and an H. Lee Moffitt Cancer Center facility in Pasco County, pointing to a need to further brace the state against a potential recession. The governor issued a $3.13 billion worth of vetoes on Thursday as he signed this record $109.9 billion budget for the fiscal year, which begins July 1st, which he said twice already in 2 paragraphs. So no A's for NPR on their grammar either. Among the items vetoed were funds to build the Rays' $35 million practice facility. Autic, who is that? It doesn't say. But I'm sure it said in the original report somewhere. Mediaite, come on. Anyway, he reported, Autic? I don't know. Is that, Outkick. All right, it's spelled wrong in the first place. Outkick is a website, a sports website, I think. Outkick reported DeSantis blocked the allocation for the team after they tweeted about recent mass shootings across the country. Bobby Burak of Outkick wrote, the governor plans to veto this $35 million facility that's earmarked for the Tampa Bay Rays spring training. DeSantis' decision is a response to this Rays politicizing recent shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde ahead of the matchup with the Yankees in May. I don't think they politicized it. They talked about it. You're the politician. You politicized it by vetoing their funding. Although, again, I don't know. It says, why should taxpayers pay for the facility? I'm not that worried about it. But it's an interesting development. The report cited a tweet from the team on May 26th that asked for donations to the gun control group Every Town for Gun Safety. That's the politicizing. So the dangerous tweet in question that comes under attack now, not just by DeSantis, but of course by, I'm glad I told you about her, Christina Pushaw, spokeswoman for DeSantis, who confirmed the report when she retweeted it on Thursday evening. She's real excited about it. She's retweeting Josh Hammer, who is somebody, a blue check mark, who says Governor Ron DeSantis is the most dynamic conservative elected official in America, the one who most clearly gets our current moment and is not a particularly close call, attaching the Outkick story about the veto. He's very excited about it. Christina Pushaw is very excited about it. And again, the offending tweet from the Tampa Bay Rays, if you click through, it's available. I might as well read it to you before we take our break. We all deserve to be safe in schools, grocery stores, places of worship, our neighborhoods, houses, and America. America, even in America. The most recent mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde have shaken us to the core. The Tampa Bay Rays are mourning these heartbreaking tragedies that took the lives of innocent children and adults. This cannot become normal. Too late for that. We cannot become numb. We cannot look the other way. We all know if nothing changes, nothing changes. And, you get what they mean by that. That's not just poor construction. The Rays organization stands committed to actionable change and has made a $50,000 commitment to Everytown for Gun Safety's support fund. Everytown is the largest gun violence prevention organization in America. It might be true. Rather than our usual game coverage on social media tonight, we've partnered with Everytown to amplify facts about gun violence in America. We understand that no single organization can solve this crisis alone, but working together we can make an impact. We invite you to join us and to do what you can, when you can, where you can, because our lives depend on it. You bastards, says Ron DeSantis. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. As I cough and choke before I turn the microphone back on, I spared you, believe me. So, okay, that's it. That's what's going on in Florida. I have to get off the Florida subject, as listener Boo Radley says. I tend to quite enjoy your off-the-news personal rambles, and I was doing just that this morning. And then you had to bring up Florida, the Fourth Reich, and our Nazi governor. Sigh. Well, sorry about that. But you're in Florida. I mean, there was no avoiding Florida for you, right? Is that what you're telling me? Our governor? Anyway... I don't know what to say about that. That's the news part of the show. I don't have to, I guess. But that's what the show is about. So, all right. Boo tunes in for the first 10 minutes on random subjects every day and then turns the computer off. I can't blame you, quite honestly. The news is pretty bad. But anyway, that's what Ron DeSantis is up to. He's a jerk. We're done with him. We can move on to other jerks who require some attention. Let's see. Quick hit. I just put this aside because I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting because Robert Costa said it was interesting. And as you know, I believe anything he says. He says, this is noteworthy. So I noted it. The thing that's noteworthy comes from Josh Shapiro, the not Republican, thank you, Democratic gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania. A lot of big words in that sentence. Josh Shapiro writes, let's speak truth. Sounds good. The big lie is still with us, and it's being peddled by extremists like Steve Bannon, boo, we know who he is, and Doug Mastriano, boo also, because we know who he is. But yay for saying extremists like Steve Bannon and Doug Mastriano. They are very similar in their approach to stealing elections, essentially. We can't allow the far right's systematic attacks on our elections to get any further. It's too dangerous, says Josh, and he attaches a Vanity Fair article on Steve Bannon's election takeover dream is starting to take shape. Is that a new article? I mean, it is, and we feel that way too. It is new. June 1st article by Eric Lutz. Probably a wise thing to read, especially as, Vanity Fair controls, limits the access to free articles. I've already clicked on it, and so I might as well get my non-money's worth out of here. But let me tell you why I put it aside in the first place. So Josh Shapiro had that to say. Robert Costa, the Washington Post reporter, says it's noteworthy in that Shapiro is, of course, the Democrats' standard bearer in one of the nation's key battlegrounds. Unlike other Democrats who have worked to link the GOP to Trump, he's also focused on others. Casts rival Mastriano as something darker than just MAGA, a Bannon type, extremist. And I think well done, probably absolutely necessary for the upcoming election. And good of Costa to note as much. Plus it turns us on to this new Vanity Fair piece. Steve Bannon's election takeover dream is starting to take shape, unlike Steve Bannon himself, who's starting to disintegrate. Illustrated with a photo of him from August of 2020, and he's just a mess. And I can't believe he's long for this world at this point. But Donald Trump is still alive, so medical science being what it is. Recordings obtained by Politico suggest the GOP is embracing the precinct strategy promoted by former Trump advisor and right-wing podcast host, a plan that could lead to chaos at the polls in November. I don't think this is a new article, but not a new story. We've read a little bit about it, but probably would be a good time for a reminder of what it is that Bannon's advocating. And it's not, interestingly, it's not crazy in the sense like the Eastman memo and Cheeseboro memos, which are really all about, taking things to an extreme with a novel, at best, interpretation of constitutional issues. The precinct thing, it's important as a part of what Eastman and Cheeseboro are doing, in the sense that the power grabs that they prescribe are dependent in part on putting people into place that are willing to rubber stamp and validate these dumb ideas in ways that give them ostensible legitimacy. I guess maybe that's the best label I can hang on it. You remember we talked about it in terms of integration with higher up offices like the governorship of Pennsylvania and Mastriano, and what it would mean for Mastriano to carry through on his threat to say, I will sign, I will go so far, if necessary, as signing a fake electoral vote certificate for Pennsylvania if Trump runs in 2024 and doesn't win Pennsylvania's electoral votes. I'll sign a certificate that says he does, so that when the certificate arrives in Congress to be counted on January 6th, 2025, then there's genuine concern and genuine, confusion. You can point to the rule book that says you're supposed to count the certificate that has the governor's signature and the Secretary of State's signature, and it is on this fake one, so what should we do? But Bannon's working at a slightly different level, which is about the precincts. And, let's read on. We'll get a reminder of what he was going on about and how it's taking shape as part of the big lie. Embracing the precinct strategy promoted by Steve Bannon, the GOP is reportedly preparing to sow chaos in the 2022 election by creating an, quote, army of poll workers and Republican lawyers to challenge voters in Democratic precincts. According to recordings obtained by Politico, and there's a link to on the word obtained, so we can go and take a look at that. When is this from? Also from June 1st. It's going to be an army. Tapes reveal GOP plan to contest elections. All right, well, we'll read the Vanity Fair version of it first. So, according to the recordings obtained by Politico, the Republican National Committee has been recruiting and training poll watchers to contest votes and building a network of party-friendly attorneys to help them. This is, as I said, it works on a different level, but it's not crazy in the sense of pushing a new constitutional theory. There have always been poll watchers and poll workers and election law attorneys who get trained up ahead of each election to do just that. But I guess doing it on this scale and instructing them to be as aggressive as they're planning to be is part of the newness of the plan. The operation has been cast by Republican officials as an effort to even out party imbalances among poll workers in urban centers like Detroit. But its true aim seems clear: to gum up the democratic process in Democratic areas, that is, lowercase the democratic process in uppercase Democratic areas, and lay the foundation for the results to be challenged in swing states like Michigan that were key to Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election. Come election day, you create massive failure of certification. Nick Penniman, founder and CEO of the election watchdog group Issue One, told Politico. The real hope is that you can throw the choosing of electors to state legislators. Okay, so back to the independent state legislature theory. The idea here being, okay, if the nobody at this point predicts that there will be any state legislatures that say, instead of having an election this time, next time, whenever, we're going to simply appoint the electors. I think they're all, at the moment, stuck with elections. Although, you know, they who knows? They're getting crazier by the day. They might decide to abandon elections sometime soon, too. But what they're hoping to do here is encourage the legislatures, now that they've told them they, you know, quote unquote, have the power to do this. Is a little bit, I mean, it's a little bit like the flip side of our nuclear option training for senators. We told them, you know, you can end the filibuster using this nuclear option. No, that's not the way it works. I've read the newspapers. They all say you need 67 votes to change the rules, not just 60. It's not like that. Well, no, actually, you can do this. And then eventually when they caught on and figured out that they could, and a parliamentarian said, yeah, I mean, it's not preferred, but it can work, and then when they found out everybody knew that it would work, you know, that was the inside-outside strategy of the whole thing. Teach the senators that there is such a thing, and then show them that their constituents know there is such a thing and know that your old dodge of saying that's not how it works won't work anymore. That's when you got movement. Here, I guess they sort of have an inside-outside strategy going here, too. For the outside strategy for them is, well, in places like Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh to some extent, you know, the big urban centers in Pennsylvania, that's where the Democrats are, and there are enough of them that they sometimes can outweigh all the Republicans in the hinterland part of Pennsylvania. And that's just the way it's always been. And it keeps Pennsylvania close, but it tends to tilt it to the Democratic side. So what can we do? We can't outvote them in Philadelphia, but we can try and pick off as many of them as possible so that the statewide total gets ever closer. If we concentrate our fire on where the Democrats are, they can still win Philadelphia overwhelmingly with, you know, whatever, 75, 85, 95% of the vote. It'll just be lower total numbers so that the hinterlands of Pennsylvania aren't necessarily outvoted. At the same time, there's the inside strategy, which is teaching the state legislators that if it doesn't come out their way, and they're a Republican and they want Trump to win Pennsylvania and he doesn't, that they can jump in and declare that he does by electing different electors. There will still be some, though, Republicans, even Republicans, a few of them will be shaky about that. I don't know. I want to win. I want to declare Pennsylvania for Trump. But, I'm into elections. And I think a lot of people are. And we had one, and I don't think it seems fair to just simply ignore the election. For those people, what they're creating here is the cover story that they need. Yes, but did you see how much voter fraud there was in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, and other urban centers? That's where the Democratic votes are. You know that our watchers were watching for fraud. This time we actually put enough of them out there that they could catch the fraud, and they did. They didn't, but they'll say that they did. And look at all this confusion. Did you know that in Philadelphia alone there are 1.7 million ballots being challenged? Imagine the breadth of this fraud. And that the idea is that shaky Republicans in Pennsylvania's state legislature will then say, yeah, you know what? That actually does worry me a little bit. I didn't want to just vote for electors outright and steal away the election. But now that you mention all this stuff that you have, quote unquote, found, I got something to stand on. Genuine, highly trained elections experts in Philadelphia. I always felt like if you really examined every vote in Philadelphia, you would find out there's really not that many Democrats after all. Plenty of Republicans are voting, and you got to hear their voices and count their votes. And these experts, they've been trained by my friends, say that there was fraud, and so I'm going to stand on that. That's the plan. That's what they want to happen inside of a state legislature. And, on top of it all, if you also have the governorship who can say, yeah, and I'll sign the certificate if you guys go and do this thing. So, or even if you don't, I'll just sign a fake certificate. I'd be willing to do that too. That'll encourage state legislators, who might otherwise say, well, what's the point? We'll have this fight, but it's not the right one. The governor's going to be compelled to sign the real one. And then it won't work, so why should I stick my neck out? Well, what if we told you the governor would participate in the fraud? Well, then I will stick my neck out. So there you go. That's it. Come election day, you create massive failure of certification. We can't certify the votes for Philadelphia because there's been 1.7 million ballots challenged. Now, there's been 1.7 million ballots challenged for BS reasons. Oh, I recorded this thing, and in case I ever needed to say that word, I would just use Greg's version of it. So the 1.7 million, I'm making that number up, ballots will be challenged for
bullshit.
Yeah, there you go. Reasons. Okay. I also took Gil's advice and I just got a bleep for myself that's just a raw bleep, so I don't have to depend on Greg saying
bullshit.
I can just say that's a reason for challenging the okay. So that's the thing. You get it. We're going to use reasons to challenge the ballots. Then we're going to say, look at how many ballots are being challenged. Never mind the reasons. Look at the raw number of ballots being challenged. How can you, in good conscience, certify the vote for Philadelphia when there's 1.7 million ballots being challenged? And, over in Harrisburg, Republicans say, geez, yeah, you're right. And so that's the idea. You create a massive failure of certification, says Nick Penniman. Back to the article. The undertaking illustrates the extent to which the GOP is institutionalizing Donald Trump's 2020 election lies and provides a glimpse into the party's efforts to hijack the infrastructure of the election system. This is where Bannon comes in. This is completely unprecedented in the history of American elections, that a political party would be working at this granular level to put a network together, Penniman said. It looks like now the Trump forces are going directly after the legal system itself, and that should concern everyone. In the wake of the 2020 election, Trump and his allies mounted a relentless effort to contest the results in several states that he lost. Under the new operation, the party could essentially do that in real time with trained poll watchers, many of whom appear to have volunteered for positions because they subscribe to Trump's rigged election lies, in direct contact with the GOP lawyers who could intervene to block vote counts at certain precincts, Politico reported. Being a poll worker, you just have so many more rights and things you can do to stop something than as a poll challenger. Matthew Seifried, Seifried, the RNC's election integrity director from Michigan, said in a November meeting with state GOP activists, according to a recording obtained by the outlet. In other words, it's not that they're saying, okay, why don't you sign up to be a volunteer poll watcher for the Republican Party in your area and we'll train you, and then you can stalk about the polls saying, that guy looks like he's fraudulently voting because he's black, or whatever the issue may be. They're saying in addition to that, they're going to do that, but they're also going to, as he says, you have so many more rights as a poll worker than as a poll challenger. Challenger is the volunteer person who gets trained by the party and goes there and says, that guy looks like he's fraudulent. Poll worker, they're talking about, get elected as the local elections clerk. Get elected as to the local elections board. Be there as one of the officials, the people to whom the screamers complain. That guy looks fraudulent. You got to do something, says screaming poll challenger to poll worker. Ordinarily, the poll worker says, Gladys, you scream this at every election. Enough already. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing. But if you put a partisan Republican lunatic in that job, you can say, have the official who can say, no, don't give that guy a ballot, can say, yeah, he does look like he's about to fraudulently vote. You're right. And, the laws are written such that perfectly normal person trying to just cast their vote, normally cast that ballot, but who's black, and therefore Gladys screams he looks fraudulent. What if the official says, you're right, he does look fraudulent? And now you can go to court and try and vindicate your rights, and if you're lucky, everything will work out in time, and you'll be able to vote because a normal person judge will say, that's crazy, you're being a jackass, give him the ballot. But on the other hand, if you send 1.7 million of them, they're not all going to get processed in time. And some people are going to lose that chance to cast those ballots. And what if there's a lunatic judge on top of it all that doesn't even get to that? So that's part of the plan, too. It's going to be an army, Seifried said at a different meeting last fall. We're going to have more lawyers than we've ever recruited because, let's be honest, that's where it's going to be fought, right? Seifried referred Politico's request to the RNC, which defended its plans. Democrats have had a monopoly on poll watching for 40 years, and it speaks volumes that they're terrified of an even playing field. RNC spokesperson Gates McGavick, that's his real name, told Politico. I think it's his real name. The RNC is focused on training volunteers to take part in the election process because polling shows that American voters want bipartisan poll watching to ensure transparency and security at the ballot box, which is not what they're actually proposing. But Americans do want that. That's just not either what we're proposing nor what we intend to deliver. It's an interesting thing, too. Democrats have had a monopoly on poll watching for 40 years. They haven't. They have held perhaps an advantage in the number of poll watchers that they've sent. But it should be pointed out that the reason have traditionally been more Democratic poll watchers out there is that Republicans tend to engage in so much more voter intimidation and voter suppression. Democrats need to be out there protecting the right of people to vote. And what's not getting discussed out here, of course, obviously because Republicans are discussing it and looking to spin it in their favor, but newspaper reporters should probably be aware of this by now. What is the primary mission of Democratic poll watchers? And the answer is to make sure that people who show up with a right to vote can exercise that right to vote. What is the primary aim of Republican poll watchers? The primary aim of a Republican poll watcher is to make sure that as many people as you can who look like they might be Democratic voters are frustrated in their purpose of casting a ballot, stopping as many people from voting. A Democratic poll watcher is about getting more people to the polls and allowing them to vote. A Republican poll watcher is about minimizing the number of people who can cast ballots. That's the major difference. And it's not anywhere in the reporting or the explanation. It's in the context of the reporting. They are telling the story, but they should just get straight to it. And they should ask that question. Well, Democrats have poll watchers. Yeah, but their poll watchers help people vote. Your poll watchers hurt people from voting, I guess, is the opposite of helping. What do you say about that? Well, it's ridiculous. How dare you? Whatever. But level the charge. You can always say you're just asking questions. Anyway, the plan is essentially the precinct strategy that was developed a decade ago by Arizona lawyer Dan Schultz and championed more recently by Bannon, the former Trump strategist. It's going to be a fight, but this is a fight that must be won, Bannon said on a podcast episode last year. We're going to take this back village by village, precinct by precinct. And again, it's possible it could work because when things happen at the precinct level, they tend not to get scrutiny until it's too late. When 1.7 million ballots throughout Philadelphia are challenged, even on total grounds, it doesn't matter. It clogs the court system, and there's only so many of them that they can clear, and so many provisional ballots that can then be cast. I mean, the fastest process to get people through, if your courts are clogged with complaints, is just say, everybody take their provisional ballots. And that's just, for Republicans, that's just living to fight another day. Okay, the judge isn't going to be with us, but he cleared the courtroom by saying everybody gets a provisional ballot. That's the only way they could handle 1.7 million complaints. That gives us a chance to then sue to segregate all the provisional ballots in the counting stage and say we want to challenge these one by one. And when they're not up against a 8 p.m. poll closing time, which is what would drive a judge to say, everybody out of the courtroom, provisional ballots, and they can take longer, several days, several weeks to count, then they can challenge the ballots once again on total grounds, but one by one, and broken up into different, districts and precincts inside of Philadelphia too. So they don't all, one lawyer doesn't have to handle 1.7 million. Anyway, it's just, it's part of the game. That's how they want to do it. As ProPublica has reported, Bannon's promotion of the bottom-up strategy has contributed to a groundswell of big lie proponents seeking roles in the election process, including as precinct officers and poll workers. Trump himself gave his blessing to the plan this year. Sure, sounds great. I win in this. I don't really understand it, but okay. So that's his blessing. Approvingly citing Schultz, who has ties to the Oath Keepers, by the way, a far-right group that took part in the January 6th insurrection, in an email to supporters in March. Just heard about an incredible effort underway that will strengthen the Republican Party, strongly strengthen the Republican Party, Trump said, according to ProPublica. If members of our great movement start getting involved, that means you becoming a precinct committeeman, not me, but you, becoming a committeeman for your voting precinct. We can take our great country back from the ground up. Okay, wonderful. It goes without saying that enlisting election deniers to exert influence over the voting process poses a major threat to the democratic system. But it is only one such threat. From anti-voting legislation enacted on the basis of Trump's lies to a gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania's Doug Mastriano, who has indicated he would not respect election results, Republicans are building on the former president's 2020 efforts to overturn his loss. The democratic process survived that stress test a year and a half ago. The one it will face in coming elections, as that anti-democratic push grows more sophisticated, could be even tougher. So, a good warning. Which brings us almost to the top of the hour break, which reminds me that there are still stories that I need to double back on and cover again. Let's see. Here's a short bit that I can still fit, I think, in here. One of the other things I want to cover that's new-ish story we haven't talked about is Jared Kushner and his hedge fund dealings with the Middle Eastern client states, and that is to say states that are his clients of his hedge funds or his private equity fund or whatever, and the launch of an investigation into that, which is good news. But first, this smaller news item that I think we can fit in here. You all remember that one of the basic facts of coming to wrap your head around, to the extent that you can, a mass shooting event like the one in Uvalde is that the first round of information is often wrong, and doubly so when it's the police giving that first round of information when it involves police actions or reactions in the case. I mean, they very frequently get everything wrong because it's just too hard to get everything right. So some of it is out of their control. There are others, parts of it, of course, that are just propaganda and they do on purpose. Well, anyway, you might remember that there was a story that I guess it looked like might deflect some of the blame from the school resource officer that either was or wasn't present at the time that the shooter arrived, or either did or didn't encounter him outside of the school. But then they quickly pivoted and said, he got in through a door that a teacher left propped open, and we can't have that, and that led to the door controversy. The Republicans adopting the no door policy to deal with the rash of mass shootings. Well, as it turns out, that wasn't exactly true either. This from ABC News. Uvalde teacher who officials mistakenly said left the door open is traumatized and heartbroken, her attorney says. And it's, of course, super awesome for a public school teacher to have to hire a private attorney. It's real easy to do and totally affordable. And I'm going to have to watch this video to get an understanding of the layout of the school. It looks like ABC News does a good job explaining it. But she's not... It doesn't help a great deal in the end. But the fact is that if you heard that she had propped the door open and then left it open for the shooter, that's not exactly true. And you can stop talking about that. But I will say, after reading this thing, what appears to have happened is she apparently propped the door open. It says here, she propped the door open for whatever reason. What was it? It was she was walking out to retrieve food from a colleague outside. I don't know whether she left her lunch in her car or what. I'm not exactly sure what that's supposed to be. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to prop the doors open. But apparently she sees the gunman coming with a gun and everything and says, oh my God, I got to close the door, and does in fact. She had propped the door open with a rock. She kicks the rock out of the way and closes the door, runs to her classroom to retrieve her cell phone and call the police. The unfortunate part, the door doesn't lock. Now, why? That's being investigated. It ain't great, that's for sure, but it's not what they said. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I'm actually, giving you what you need to know about that story. I am not certain why it doesn't happen. They're actually investigating what happened in terms of why the door doesn't lock. That must have been extraordinarily disappointing. You see a gunman heading for your school, so you close the door and run to get your phone and report it, which I guess is the right thing to do, although it does raise questions. Not all schools have all the modern equipment, but they're supposed to have equipment like doors that lock. That's true. And yes, she should never have really been propping the door open, I guess, for any reason. But, when there's no shooter running at the door, you can see why that might happen, and a totally normal thing to do. I guess if this is the door facing the parking lot and your friend says, I got to go to my car or to your car. I'm going to my car for something. You want me to go to your car and bring you back your thing? Whatever it is. Right? And you might open the door for them, let them out, and then say, I'll hold the door open for you so you don't have to go all the way around to the front of the building to get in. And as long as when you come back you don't have a gun, I'll let you in. Now, if I do see a guy with a gun coming at the building, I will close the door. That's normal. Also, normally those doors are supposed to lock. So it's an open question. What's wrong? Is the lock broken? Is there something weird about it? Who knows? I guess they'll investigate this and find out. But, a lot of schools also, when they put in more security things to deal with the constant threat of mass shooting, have installed panic buttons around the school, sometimes in the classroom, whatever, so that, you can hit the button and it goes to lockdown right away. And in some schools, everything's all wired up. The newer schools, everything's all wired up and all the doors will lock and things will, go into motion to lock the school down when you hit that button. And I guess they didn't have one. So she ran to get her cell phone, I guess probably to call 911 to say there's a guy with a gun running into the school. But as you know, calling 911 in Uvalde apparently doesn't do a great deal for you. And so in the meantime, as she gets on the phone, the shooter arrives and says, I guess I'll just try my luck and see if the door's open. And it was, because it was friggin' broken or something. I don't know. So that's what they need to look into. But I don't know. The headline makes it. I mean, it is the case that when they said the door was propped open and that's how the shooter got in, that's not true. When the shooter arrived at the door was closed. But apparently, no great shakes, because the door was closed but unlocked. I don't know whether anything that the teacher did when she opened that door for her colleague to go out and come back unlocked the door. But in my experience, no, those things remain locked. If it's one of those standard doors, you push the push bar, it'll let you out the door because fire code requirements. And then when you let the door swing shut, it locks, which is why they propped the door open in the first place. I'll prop the door open for you so you can go to your car, get your stuff, and return through this door, because if I don't prop it and the door closes, what will happen? Everyone expects the right answer. It will lock, and then you won't be able to simply open it and get in. If she had known that door wouldn't lock for whatever reason when she let it swing shut, she wouldn't have had to prop it open in the first place. So, I mean, you can blame her for propping open a door and whatever. But, obviously it was her expectation that the thing was going to lock behind her when she shut the door. That would have been, I'm sure, plan A when you finally see a guy hop the fence with an AR-15 and you shut the door and say, now he won't be able to get in. And I'll call the police so they can come to the outside of the building and arrest this guy. I think you're entitled to count on that. But apparently it didn't work. And probably because of something Greg Abbott did. Quite honestly, you should go look into it. Investigate that, why don't you? Anyway, bad story developing that. All right, so what about Jared Kushner? We can move to that story. Just let you know, it looks like it's not a very long one, because all they're saying is, well, we're going to be investigating. House panel examining Jared Kushner over Saudi investment in new firm. When we say Saudi investment, we mean investments by the Saud family. I really don't know why we continue to pretend that that's just like a regular country and not a large familial compound. Anyway, the House Oversight Committee is the committee in question. They are seeking documents related to the $2 billion investment by a Saudi fund in the private equity firm started by Mr. Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law and former advisor. And they are well advised themselves to look into this. Kate Kelly and David D. Kirkpatrick report for the New York Times here. A House committee said on Thursday that it was investigating whether Jared Kushner, you know who he is, traded on his government position to land a $2 billion investment in his private equity firm from a prominent Saudi Arabian wealth fund. That is to say, the Saud family's money, or the money that the Saud family lays claim to, now having, removed it from the pockets of the quote-unquote citizens living in their compound. Anyway, sure, he traded on his government position. Why else would anybody give $2 billion to Jared Kushner? He certainly, A, doesn't need it, and B, is not capable of handling it properly, so why would you do it? Remember, of course, the Saud family's financial advisors looked over the proposal and said, no, don't do this. It's a bad idea. There's no track record here. Go with somebody else. And they said, nah, we're going to go with this guy that you don't like. And the reason is because he had traded on his government position to land this investment. So, okay, everybody knows that to be the case, but can we prove it in a court of law? So, now, Carolyn Maloney, chair of the House Oversight Committee, has said, we will look at this and see if we can provide the proof. I don't know whether she's capable of finding it or providing it or not, but she's going to try. And she's also in a primary right now. I think she and Jerry Nadler got redistricted into the same district, which is a little crazy, but it's happening. And so they're going to be competing to use their committee perches to show that they are the Democrat that New Yorkers need to keep. So this is a good entry in that sweepstakes, if you ask me. And she's not bad at this, by the way. So, she's not my favorite person necessarily, but she does make pretty good use of her committee. So does Jerry Nadler. He's been a little frustrating at times, to be sure. Carolyn Maloney has never been in a position to leave me frustrated, but that also means that she's not. The committee tends not to develop evidence that goes anywhere other than bad headlines for the person they're investigating, which is sometimes enough. Anyway, so let's see, where were we? She gives Kushner a 2-week deadline in a letter sent on Thursday to furnish documents related to the Saudi fund's investment last year in his firm, Affinity Partners. Big whoop. He may or may not comply. We'll find out. Then it'll be a whole contempt thing and it goes nowhere. Or he might come in and say, yeah, I got money. What's the problem? She also asked for any personal correspondence between Kushner and the Saudi kingdom's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mr. Bonesaw, during or after the Trump administration. That she probably won't get. The committee, Ms. Maloney wrote in the 8-page letter, is investigating, quote, whether your personal financial interests improperly influenced U.S. foreign policy during the administration of your father-in-law, former President Trump. In a statement, a spokesman for Kushner said, while achieving 6 peace deals in the Middle East, yeah, right, sort of, Mr. Kushner fully abided by all legal and ethical guidelines both during and after his government service. You have to say that if you're the spokesperson for Kushner, obviously. And 6 peace deals? I think it was Israel is in all 6 of them, of course. Israel and 6 other partners, which I mean, it might be, I don't know whether the UAE is one partner or whether the various emirates that make up the UAE are among, counted individually among the 6. But remember also that these are peace deals with countries with whom Israel is not actually at war. But okay, whatever. That's nearly, the lesser part of this story. He is proud to be among many private sector stakeholders advancing connectivity between Americans, Israelis, and Arabs to encourage continued regional progress, the statement continued. I will give Kushner's people this. They are far better spoken and more articulate than Trump team people ever were. They're jerks. They might in fact be incompetent, but they can issue a communique. Anyway, a spokesman for the Saud family, that is to say the Saudi government, and the Saud family's wealth advisors, the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the entity that made the $2 billion investment, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Thanks to congressional redistricting, here it is, Maloney, a veteran lawmaker from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, faces a tough primary fight against Jerry Nadler, her longtime colleague and fellow Democrat from the Upper West Side. Mr. Nadler, who's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, played a prominent role in Trump's 2 impeachment hearings and has campaigned on his role as a critic of the Trump administration. Maloney's letter refers to disclosures first published by the New York Times in early April that the Saudi government's main sovereign wealth fund invested $2 billion in Kushner's firm, despite objections from one of its own internal committees over his lack of relevant investment experience. That investment occurred less than 6 months after Kushner left his post in the White House, a role that had given him broad oversight of the administration's diplomacy efforts in the Middle East. During his time in government, Kushner developed a close rapport with Mr. Bonesaw, even as the prince faced criticism over his human rights record for murdering and dismembering journalists, and Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. I hope that's not the Saudi secret police at the door. We'll find out in just a minute, I guess. Later, when the planned $2 billion investment in Kushner's private equity firm encountered skepticism from public investment fund officials, a fund board led by Prince Bonesaw voted to approve it anyway. Ethics experts have raised concerns about the Saudi fund's investment in Mr. Kushner's firm, which according to filings appears to account for the vast majority of its $2.5 billion in assets. In other words, the Saudis are in half billions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4/5 of the total assets of his fund are from Saudi Arabia. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, has urged the Justice Department to, quote, take a really hard look at whether Kushner violated any criminal laws. In her letter dated Tuesday, Maloney noted that the parent company of Affinity was incorporated on January 21st, 2021, the day after Kushner left the White House. Your close relationship with Crown Prince bin Salman, your pro-Saudi positions during the Trump administration, and PIF's, I guess public investment funds, decision to fund the lion's share of your new business venture, only 6 months after the end of your White House tenure, she wrote, create the appearance of a quid pro quo for your foreign policy work. And we know how much Trumps love to say they hate quid pro quos. Quids pro quo? I don't know. Anyway, rather than alleging the violation of any existing law, Maloney wrote that the investigation would seek to gather information about whether stricter laws are needed to restrain former public officials from doing business with their past government counterparts. That would be the legislative purpose of the hearing. The House Oversight Committee has examined both the Trump administration and its relationship with Saudi Arabia in the past. In 2019, it investigated the White House's granting of a security clearance to Kushner, despite red flags raised by intelligence officials, and issued reports on the administration's willingness to share nuclear power technology with the kingdom. You'll remember that was one of Mike Flynn's pet projects as well. By the way, interesting connection there to the prior investigation. Recall, again, the bulk of this story as well. Didn't you use your government position and your contact with the Saudis, the Sauds, to get their money? Yes, you did. How is it, by the way, that you came in contact at such high levels with the Sauds, considering that you should have had to have a big-time security clearance in order to be the one negotiating these so-called peace treaties? And isn't it the case that you were not able to get a security clearance because of concerns among the intelligence officials? The intelligence community thought that you were too easily corruptible, perhaps, to get that security clearance. And that your father-in-law intervened and said, give him the security clearance anyway. Of course he's going to steal money. That's the whole point. Get out of here. Give him the clearance. And then they gave him the clearance, and then he went and he used it to steal money. So, kind of everybody who had those concerns was right. So there's a little bit of connection between this investigation and the past one. Don't give him the security clearance. He's going to use it to steal money. Oh, yeah, one side's dad, the guy in charge in here overrides that. No, all right. In order to steal this money, in order to arrange this private equity fund to be filled up by Saud family money, you're going to have to come in contact with them and do them some favors. So there's a quid pro quo. But I can't get to them to do the favors without a security clearance. Fine, sure. All you people who recommend no security clearance, you're fired. You're fired. And he didn't fire him, but just give him the clearance anyway. Now, from the other side, they say, in order for the Public Investment Fund to give you the money, the board has to approve it. Board, what do you think? No, don't do it. It's crazy. He doesn't know what he's doing. Overridden by Mr. Bonesaw. We're going to waive that on our side. You waive the security clearance. You waive the due diligence. That's all that was necessary to give him the $2 billion. All right. I mean, like for everybody else, it's insurmountable barriers. How are you going to get past the security clearance if you are so eminently bribable that the CIA or whoever says, no, don't, National Security Agency. There's no way you can give this guy the clearance. How are you going to get it? Become president or become the son-in-law of somebody who's the president. All right, but that's only part one. The other one is, how do I get a hold of the $2 billion? I have to convince the Saudi Public Investment Fund to give me the money. Mohammed bin Salman isn't going to give it to me out of his pocket. He's going to take it out of somebody else's pocket, Public Investment Fund. Oh, but remember, we're pretending to be a country. So, we got this pesky board that is what legitimizes our public investment fund. Like, oh, this isn't my money. It's the government's money. Now, I direct it and everything, but, we have public oversight of it so that I don't just steal it or give it to my friends. Okay. So, board, should we invest, quote unquote, invest in Jared Kushner? No, he's untrustworthy. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got no experience in this, but he has got, the Prince bin Salman might say, Well, he's trusted enough to get a security clearance in the United States. Yeah, but that was fake. His father-in-law gave him that. Yeah, I will tell you what. I'm giving him this. So is it a public investment fund? No, it's not. The prince can say, to hell with the public part of this, give him the money. So it's long odds. It's not something that you or I could just walk in there and get $2 billion just by, shining the apple just so. You got to get the leaders of two countries on board with waiving major structural protections against fraud. And who would it be dumbest to waive those for? This guy, someone just like this, who the intelligence community says, no, don't give him a security clearance. He'll sell the secrets. He will absolutely do that. He needs $2 billion, I think, right, to save his family real estate fortunes from the stupid building that he bought. And he's been begging for the $2 billion from somebody even richer than him for a long, long time. And he'll do anything. It's our judgment he'll do just about anything to get that money, including sell out American national security interests. That's why we won't give him the clearance. Well, give him the clearance anyway. And our laws say the president gets to do that, even if the president is a total idiot and paints his face orange every morning. Okay, here you go. But even then, it doesn't work. You have to do the same thing in Saudi Arabia. And you can say, I'll murder you or have your head chopped off if you don't give him the money. All right, fine. Give him the money. So that's how he got $2 billion. And ladies and gentlemen, what I'm telling you, tell your kids, in America, this is possible for anyone who can gain control of the United States government and the Saud family compound known as Saudi Arabia and their government. All you got to do is do that, and then you can walk away with $2 billion. And hey, if it all disappears or all goes to pay for the big building in New York, bad business decisions. Don't know what to tell you. To which Mohammed bin Salman might say, or people working at the Saudi Public Investment Fund will say, I thought we were investing this money. We were supposed to get money back. And then they'll say, remember the report of the board that said you would lose it all? Right. Well, we lost it all. We were right about that. But whose fault is it? Well, it's Prince Mohammed bin Salman's fault. But he will chop your head off if you say that. Well, if he wanted to give his friends $2 billion, why didn't he just give his friends $2 billion? Well, one, he did. But two, is going to give $2 billion of his own money to Kushner? No. Remember, the plan is for this money to be stolen. I'm not going to do it out of my pocket. I'm going to do it out of your pocket, the Public Investment Fund. Because, after all, I'm just robbing the Saudi public. It's a kingdom. I'm supposed to rob the people here in order to reward my friends and punish my enemies. That's what we do in kingdoms. So, on some level, it makes sense. All right. Now time to turn around and get back to those other stories that I wanted to tell you about. Let's see. Well, I've got to find them first. First of all, the donut ones are in the way. Second of all, there's a smaller bore story that I wanted to get to, too. There's a lot here. Where were we? Yes. First, we'll start with the story of that I began with the other day, with the fake news story that was getting reported all over the place. Don Moynihan in his Substack was explaining. I got to about the first half of his story. As a refresher, we are talking about, as he says, the tale of a fake news story widely shared by a lot of smart people, maybe, who so badly wanted for it to be true that they didn't care that it wasn't. Familiar, right? It is also the tale of the decline of local news in America, the wave of pink slime, remember that term, that is replacing it, feeding the destructive partisan narratives about public institutions. Here is the headline and the image of the viral story. You can't see the image, but you have seen it on Twitter if you've participated over the last week. OPRF, one of the local school boards, where was it? Outside of Chicago. OPRF to implement race-based grading system in 2022-23 school year. The gist of which was to get Republicans mad. The insinuation being this school system near Chicago is going to give black kids A's when they don't deserve it in order to equalize their achievements with white students, and that is bad because I don't remember exactly what, something. We were taught that that was wrong, and it is, and it's also not true. But also they might get into Harvard and my kid won't, is I guess what they're ultimately worried about. This the interesting part for part 2 is this story is attributed to LGIS News Service. And who the hell is that? So Don goes on to say, all right, here's the lead, the outrage part. Oak Park and River Forest High School administrators will require, they won't, but they say in this news story that they will, require teachers next year to adjust their classroom grading scales to account for the skin color or ethnicity of its students. In an effort to equalize test scores among racial groups, OPRF will order its teachers to exclude from their grading assessments variables it says disproportionately hurt the grades of black students. They can no longer be docked for missing class. What's docking anyway? Misbehaving in school or failing to turn in their assignments, according to the plan. Which, by the way, I have news for you. White students also get that. One thing I've noticed in putting kids through school, there is nothing like what it used to be for turning in late work when we were growing up. You know, the old system was you can turn in work late. Like a nice, kind and understanding teacher would say, you can turn in work late, but you lose a grade for every day it's late. So that if you hand me an A paper one day late, the best you can get is a B. A 100 on a paper that's late by a day is a B. They don't do that so much anymore. Anyway, this sounds bad, as Dan continues. The Chicago suburban school handing out different grades depending on race. You can't punish students for misbehaving. Not surprisingly, people were outraged. The story went viral with big Twitter names posting it to their hundreds of thousands of followers. Some would later delete their tweet for reasons that will become clear below. The school released a statement which included, I read it the other day. Their statement basically, no, we're not doing that. That's not the plan. It's never been the plan. We were never going to do anything like that. At no time was any statement made recommending that we do that. That's basically just false. In other words, no new policies had been adopted, no matter what they would have said. Plus, nobody actually said that they should think about a policy that does this. A committee on grading and assessment provided an initial report. There is no race-based gradings, no plan to grade students differently using different standards according to race, nothing like that. One of the accounts, though, clearly must be inaccurate. Unfortunately, it's the one that went viral, that is to say, the fake one. Don says, let's dig a little more. The only direct evidence that the report provided about the proposed policy change, no matter what it is, was a PowerPoint deck presented at a May 26th school board meeting, and this is the most damning slide, which the piece quoted, which reminded me, it was just like the CRT panic when there was a slide deck for training teachers about inclusivity in the schools. And they said, this is A, actually CRT, and B, being presented to students and indoctrinating them with it, when it was, in fact, one, not, to use a different lettering system. I go back to the lettering. A, not CRT, and B, not being presented to students, but rather to teachers. Similarly here, this is not the teacher's directive. It's, I'm proposing to a board that we think about something to do with disparities according to race in terms of achievement. One of the slides says, summary of findings, and here are the bullet points. Traditional grading practices perpetuate inequities and intensify the opportunity gap. The reaction to which can be, well, tough. That's, let me use my thing. Tough. We got to use the regular grades anyway. There's no way around it. Or they could say, we'll approach things differently. We could offer classes for lower achieving students that will be more suited to their needs and advance them further than our old curriculum. It could be anything. Next bullet point, integrating equitable assessment and grading practices into all academic and elective courses requires the collaborative effort of a team of educators committed to improvements that benefit all students. Bullet 3, many OPRFHS teachers are successfully exploring and implementing more equitable grading practices such as utilizing aspects of competency-based grading, eliminating zeros from the grade book, and encouraging a rewarding growth over time. Encouraging and rewarding growth over time. Teachers and administrators at the school, I'm a little bit behind on our music, will continue the process necessary to make grading improvements that reflect our core beliefs. So no real specifics about what they would do, just about what some of their goals are. Nothing in the PowerPoint slide or anywhere in the article is anything that would support the claim laid out in the lead that a policy change has taken place and that students can no longer be, say, docked for missing class.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Okay, a little bit, I'm going by the musical cue, not by the clock, so we're a little bit behind. I know you've been waiting on the edge of your seat. We left off, of course, by saying, well, look, none of this turns out to be true. There is no policy change that has been taking place. That's premature, for one thing, and for another, no, nobody's really proposing any policy where you can no longer dock students for missing class or misbehaving or failing to turn in assignments. Thus, Don continues, the piece has failed the most basic journalistic standard. It has not provided evidence either for the sensationalistic headline or its core claims. Well, what does the reporter have to say about this? No byline beyond the mysterious LGIS news service. Well, you might ask then, well, what is LGIS news service? The answer reveals much more about our media environment and is even more disturbing than the botched story suggests. So are you ready for a more interesting part of this story? The next section, awash in pink slime. Again, it's a bit of a throwback term. But local government information services is LGIS. What is that, though? I know that's funny. If you were talking to a Republican about it, you'd say, well, my question is, what's LGIS? And they'll say, the answer is local government information services. And we'll say, well, what's that? I've answered your question, sir. Well, I wasn't asking, what do the letters LGIS stand for? I was asking, what is this organization? Oh, well, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. But not Don Moynihan. He goes on to say that Local Government Information Services is the publisher of lots of local news media. Maybe that's what it is. That's what they call it. Local news media in Illinois. With titles like Southern Illinois News and SW, as in Southwest Illinois News. It's like, we're local. We're a local news source. Turn to us. We're news. It says so right in the name. LGIS is part of a much larger network of local news in multiple states. As local news media has disappeared, pink slime outlets like LGIS have taken their place, relying on low-cost or automated content repeated across sites and eschewing basic journalistic practices. Just how big and how connected are these local news outlets? Well, that's difficult discern. In 2020, the New York Times counted about 1,200 connected local news outlets that had arisen in just 10 years. Now, I mean, at this point, we haven't proven what they are yet. So it sounds like, aren't you being a little overly dramatic about, wow, we found over 1,200 connected local news outlets. Well, sure. I mean, local news outlets, there's going to be a lot of them. Could they be under the same ownership? Yes, but there's nothing necessarily nefarious about that, though it's not something you would hope for, but okay, tell me more then. And of course, the fact that it had arisen in just 10 years might be meaningful to you as well. There's a graphic here from the New York Times article about it, and nothing I can do but tell you to take a look at it when you get a chance, and we share this link with you. Behind this empire of pink slime is Brian Timpone. I don't know whether he pronounces the E on the end or not. Timpone. Timpone, a conservative businessman and former journalist with a record of plagiarism and fabrication. It's linked. Chicago Tribune is the one reporting on that if you want to check those allegations out. It is not just that his media has an ideological outlook. It does. Or that it frequently uses deceptive practices such as the story detailed here. They are also directly funded by conservative advocates, a fact that is rarely disclosed to readers. And of course, if you're reading the news site, you're going to want to know that. Oh, they're news, they're fair and unbiased. That is, they agree with me all the time. And that should not come as a surprise because it's paid for by one sponsor or another. And that sponsor might be the Koch Foundation or something quite like it. Who knows? We'll see if we can find out exactly who it is in this article. But you don't want that in a news site. They should be independent in their funding. But anyway, they're not. At least $1.7 million could be traced going from Republican campaigns to Timpone's companies. But the actual number is unknown given the shadowy nature of the flow of political money and the obtuse structure of these networks. The New York Times documented how this works. And I think that maybe their documentation is the other story I have waiting in the wings here. Yes, the New York Times documented it. A freelance reporter took $22 to write a critical piece about an opponent of Susan Collins to be published in the Maine Business Daily. The article featured quotes from Collins' campaign under the headline, Senator Collins' camp says House Speaker Gideon's actions are hypocritical. But it did not contact the subject of the story, that is to say, Speaker Gideon's office. The client funding the story was a Republican operative. So it's as little as $22. Like, can I get a critical story about Speaker Gideon that says she's a hypocrite? Yes, that'll be $22. Says this network, LGIS. In other words, an operation or a partisan operative can, for a fee, use dark money, or any kind of money for that matter, but you can use dark money too, to get another partisan operative to publish campaign materials masquerading as local news. The Collins campaign could put out their own flyer that says, Senator Collins' camp says House Speaker Gideon's actions are hypocritical, and write the whole story and print it, pay to print it, and leave it in everybody's mailbox, right? Or send it through the mail. They could pay to do that, but that's a lot more money. Or you give $22 to somebody. Would you write this story and would you put it up on a site that's called Maine Business Daily? A business, that's news. It's not a partisan operation. It's only about business. What can I tell you? This really happened. This campaign did say that thing, right? So it is factual, but you see how it works here? For a fee, you can use dark money to get another partisan operative. One partisan pays another partisan to publish campaign materials that would cost a lot more, but instead do it for less and call it news. Say it's from the news. It's in the news. It's in Maine Business Daily. That's all. Freelancers, many of whom, by the way, don't live in the U.S., In case you were wondering, well, who takes just $22 to do this? How about somebody in Bangladesh, if they know their English well enough? That's all it takes. So freelancers, many of whom don't live in the U.S., let alone the locality they're supposed to be covering, are paid a pittance directed who to interview and what to write, often by the clients, who are sometimes the subject of flattering coverage. One sales pitch to such clients offered, remember this is a business, so LGIS will go to your campaign and say, tell you what, for $2,000, we'll give you a package that includes 5 articles and unlimited news releases. So we'll write 5 articles however you want them, critical of your enemy, supportive of you. Plus, we'll let you, anytime you write the content as a press release, we'll run it. Unlimited, $2,000 up front. Just give me the money. Can you believe this? The salesman stressed that reporters, quote unquote reporters, I would say, would call the shots on some articles. I guess that way they can pretend they're still journalists, while the client would have a say on others. And you might say, well, I want a say in all of them. Well, that's the $10,000 package. This $2,000 package is, sometimes it's a crapshoot. In some cases, the clients simply provide the content directly. One GOP candidate paid Timponi's companies $55,000 over 3 years and received consistent and positive coverage from the Timponi's Illinois media outlets, including the publication of verbatim press releases. Here is an illustration of how deeply incestuous the processes of news production and dissemination are at the local level. And I guess, remember, keep in mind that the internet revolutionizes all of this, right? It used to be like, well, if you want to put your money into publishing stupid newspapers that cover all this stuff, that's expensive. And you only want to charge $22 for it, that's up to you. But now most people very happily get all their news online. They start by saying, I'm just going to get the New York Times or Washington Post or whatever my local paper is online. But, once you start Googling things or looking for information, or people send you links to something, you go to a site that's not one of the ones that you know about, but it's dressed up to look like news, and it calls itself news, and it has this story in it. So it's news. Now you're used to it. So yeah, you can make it work over the internet. Dan Proft is a former Republican candidate turned radio host in Illinois. What an idiot, a radio host. He promotes West Cook news stories like the one attacking OPRF High School. What his listeners might not know is that Proft is a partner of Timpone, one of the founders of LGIS, and is listed as the company's president on state documents. In just 2 years, Proft funneled almost $650,000 from his political action committee to LGIS, which largely came from one Republican mega donor, Dick Uihlein. Proft also serves as a fellow at the Illinois Policy Institute, which advocates for conservative policy goals in education, which is a minor part of all this. But what a setup. Why don't I set something like this up? I'm a radio host, right? I could tell you sensational stories. My problem is I rely on other people producing the sensational stories. If I find them and they're interesting, I'll read them to you. But what if I wanted there to be a narrative about how about the Trump Mustang hashtag and how it's catching on all over the world and everybody is saying it, and what that really means is XYZ, right? Well, I could make that up, but then you guys would say, you made that up. I don't think you would fall for this, but people who are, susceptible to this, it's not me telling you this, it's LGIS News Service. I don't know anything about them. I'd be forced to say I don't know anything about them. You can go and check them out. But, I'm sure Dan Proft is saying they're awesome. They're fantastic. They're the best news services ever. I have nothing to do with them whatsoever, except you're actually the president of LGIS, and you are funneling money to them that comes from a Republican mega donor. He gives it to you. You give it to LGIS. LGIS pays you as the president. They produce the stories you want, and now your radio show. How hard is it to plan a radio show if you get to dictate what the news is? Not hard, but also very profitable. It's just that there's no Democratic mega donors who would give me money to do this, and I wouldn't want to do it anyway, and neither would they. And we suffer for it. Anyway, how many consumers of these ostensibly local news sources know that they are, in reality, the end point of a political advocacy network, one built to order to serve Republican policy goals? The structure of these financing arrangements ensures that the networks have strong incentives to be accountable to donors, but not to the public, or basic journalistic standards. With the inclusion of ideologically aligned think tanks, often funded by the same donors, the partisan network has a fully integrated operation that can define policy problems, disseminate their stories, never mind if they're false, boost the funders, and propose policy solutions. Next section, motivated reasoning and fake news. The viral story comes from an ecosystem of paid partisan news. We don't know if the story was ordered by an advocate or what their agenda might be. Much of the time, such stories do not need the virality achieved here and associated scrutiny to have an impact at a local level where there are few, if any, competing resources. So, why should intelligent people share a sensationalistic headline story from an unfamiliar source with some pretty large gaps? If they cared to look closely at the details, you'd see those gaps. Well, blame it on motivated reasoning, a form of confirmation bias that makes us more critical of information that runs contrary to our ideological beliefs, but more credulous of information that aligns with those beliefs. In my own research, Don says, I've pointed to the ways that motivated reasoning causes policymakers both to make decision-making errors and then double down when challenged. Other researchers have looked specifically at how motivated reasoning relates to the sharing of fake news. They examined the behavior of 2,300 actual Twitter users. The most frequent sharers of fake news were not ignorant, but were highly polarized. And from the study, I guess this quote, thus, individuals who report hating their political opponents are the most likely to share political fake news and selectively share content that is useful for derogating those opponents. Overall, our findings show that fake news sharing is fueled by the same psychological motivations that drive other forms of partisan behavior, including sharing partisan news from traditional and credible news sources. Maybe we were always like that, or maybe things have gotten worse. But what this story illustrates is that the supply of false stories designed to feed motivated reasoning has become worse, at least on the right. Local journalists with a sense of responsibility to their journalistic ethics, their personal reputation, and the community they live in have been replaced by anonymous for-hire freelancers, paid crumbs, by the way, to feed the motivated reasoning beast. To be clear, it's perfectly reasonable to debate the effects of educational practices, but they should be actual educational practices. As I've noted elsewhere, so much of contemporary education debate and policymaking is based on unrepresentative examples and moral panics that needlessly denigrate and censor teachers. I mean, keep in mind that for the past 3 months, they've been having to tamp down all over the country on the litter box stories that just keep cropping up. I don't know where that is coming from. Whether LGIS has anything to do with it, but, see how easily this can happen. People want to believe these sorts of stories are not just true, but typical. But of course, they type and retweet. Or rather, but of course they type and retweet. I see. Of course this is happening. I guess that's what that's supposed to mean. Even after they've been corrected, they might think to themselves, well, maybe this specific piece was exaggerated, but it is representative of a broader trend. I understand. That happens to me from time to time. The episode is indeed representative and telling, but of something that has gone wrong in our media landscape. When you give the benefit of the doubt to partisan fake news rather than professional educators, it's hard to take the whole "I'm here to defend education" bit seriously. Our looming crisis in education is not runaway wokeness, which local school boards can police, if they have to, if it even exists, but the willingness of those who should know better to reflexively denigrate the teaching profession. So an interesting conclusion as well. And as I said, there was New York Times reporting on this, and I saw the tweet of Davey Alba the other day, who says on the left, he has two photos illustrating. On the left, the deceitful story about a Chicago suburban school supposedly handing out different grades depending on race. On the right, the New York Times expose Davey Albee, wrote about how this website is part of a network of local sites run by Republican operatives. And here is the New York Times version of that story that Don Moynihan just told us. As local news dies, a pay-for-play network rises in its place. A nationwide operation of 1,300 local sites publishes coverage that is ordered up by Republican groups and corporate PR firms. So I think the story is largely the same, obviously, and I don't know whether Moynihan's Substack article did, in fact, originally cite to this story, or whether it was something he added after Davey Albee began tweeting his link to it or not. I didn't get a chance to read all the way through it the other day. Either way, I'm glad the information is in there. Davey Albee joined by Jack Nicas, Nicas, on this, and I got to tell you, I'm looking at the photos that accompany this, and it looks to me like Davey Albee is not, it's Davey, but it made me think Davey, like, the nickname for David, but it's not. And so it might be Dave or Davi. Davey is, Dave Alba is a woman by all appearances, although I can always be wrong about that too. But I guess we should try and get that right. What's the Twitter profile say here? I guess I should open that up here. Bloomberg technology reporter. And look at that. I guess Filipino American woman here saying, Google, Big Tech, and Misinfo are her beats. Ask for my signal. I take tips not only in English but Tagalog, so that helps figure out a little bit about who she actually is. Okay, so initial mistake there, just based on the name, but I encourage you to read through the story. I think, like I said, probably pretty well explained by Don Moynihan, but I guess with some greater detail and at some greater length, and with some great illustrations of what these pages look like and how easy it is to mistake them as news. I think that's very important, so I very much recommend to you that you take a look through their reporting, and after all, they deserve credit for it, and that's what the tweet was about, and so I'm glad to give that credit, even if I screwed up on the pronunciation of your name and expressed doubts about my own understanding of your gender. I hope I've gotten it right. Anyway, let's see, a couple other things that we might be able to squeeze in before we finally wrap things up. Here's a story about another fakey fake operation that I thought was kind of interesting. Let's see if we can squeeze this in. The short story here is from the tweet of Catherine Joyce, investigative reporter at Salon, who I believe is involved in the story that is linked here because it's also from Salon. Catherine says, in April, anti-CRT crusader Chris Rufo, who's definitely prone to this sort of hyperbole and is open about using it to win his battles, called on conservative lawmakers to create standalone academic centers in flagship public universities as, quote, a separate patronage system for the right. Just okay. Turns out that project is already well underway, according to this piece in Salon. Why not take a look at it real quick to wrap up the weekend, the pre-weekend discussion roundup. Exclusive, for now anyway. Now the far right is coming for college, too, with taxpayer-funded, quote, classical education. Who can argue with that? I guess that's the cover idea. Republicans are channeling tax dollars to right-wing institutes at colleges across the nation. What's the end game? Better just dive in. Last fall, when professors at Flagler College, a private liberal arts school in St. Augustine, Florida, gathered for a faculty senate meeting, they learned that the college administration had worked with their local legislator to propose a new academic center on campus. Oh, sounds good. Money, right? The Flagler College Institute for Classical Education. Who could argue? To administrators, it was an exciting prospect. The chance to receive $5 million from the state to shore up their first-year seminar, a universal core curriculum for incoming freshmen intended to help students, particularly first-generation college students, prepare for the rigors of college. Great. But some faculty members felt concerned, reading between the lines, in a state that has become ground zero for the nation's education debates, where Governor Ron DeSantis, again, sorry, boo, a Trump-style Republican with his eyes on the White House, has imposed gag orders and mandates on K-12 schools and described universities as hotbeds of stale ideology and indoctrination factories. Well, he'll use it for his own purposes now. Flagler's Institute would, the proposal said, promote free inquiry and critical thinking, which struck some faculty members as a confusing restatement of what was already their primary job. Then there was the promise to promote a balanced worldview, which is a good thing to have, but okay, is this code? What's going on? The value and responsibilities of citizenship, or what the college's president characterized as classical education without an, quote, ideological slant, which sounded like potentially coded language for the sorts of measures DeSantis and his allies had been promoting. It didn't help that one Flagler trustee, perceived as being a key driver of the proposal, John Rood, R-O-O-D, a former ambassador under George W. Bush, who chairs the governing board of the Jacksonville Classical Academy, part of a nationwide charter school network created by Hillsdale College, a private Christian college in Michigan that has become a major player in America's culture wars. To some faculty, the proposed institute felt like an attempt to make Flagler College the hillside of the South. Flagler's vice president of academic affairs, Arthur Vanden Houten, said in an interview that while Rood had enthusiastically responded to plans for the institute, he wasn't its only supporter or inspiration. If the proposal is ultimately funded, Vanden Houten said, it was approved by the legislature in March, but still awaits DeSantis' review. It will only help Flagler continue the work that it already does. While the outcome at Flagler is still unclear on multiple levels, there were legitimate reasons for faculty to be alarmed, given the range of recent conservative assaults on public education, particularly but not exclusively in Florida. At a number of prominent colleges and universities around the country, big money conservative interests are proposing and creating a roster of educational centers dedicated to conservative ideology or laissez-faire economics. That's already a problem in the MBA program. Often wrapped in the language of classical education, civics, or freedom. The concept in itself isn't new. Right-wing philanthropists have been creating academic programs in their own image for decades. Oh, I've documented all of that. The Olin Foundation, all sorts of things. I can't even remember all the names of it. SCAFE foundations, etc. It happens all over the place, and totally tried to document that interlocking network. But these days, the model has been adopted by Republican-led legislatures, too, effectively using taxpayer dollars to implant conservative ideology in public institutions. By the way, they were always using taxpayer dollars just in terms of fungibility and Supreme Court precedent. The fact that these things were being funded by tax-exempt nonprofit philanthropies funded by arch-conservative donors, and they were, so the part of the money that they would get from whatever business they're in would be funneled into this thing, and it would be a tax write-off. And a tax write-off, a tax deduction, is like a government grant in terms of the fungibility of money, which we learned from the Bob Jones University cases way back when. But, it's like an acceptable disguise for this. But okay, now they're just using it straight out of the public coffers through the legislature. It's not that the faculty suspect the administration is scheming or duplicitous in any way, said Flagler history professor Michael Butler, director of the school's African American Studies program. The concern is that the culture wars of 2022 are moving into higher education, and we're not sure what that means for Flagler College. This proposal does not come in a vacuum. So what's going on? Ron DeSantis, of course, in his response to critical race theory, which they enclose in quotes here because we're not sure whether we're talking about the real thing or not, When Flagler faculty pictured what they didn't want the institute to become, they didn't have to look far. Also included in Florida's proposed budget, or more specifically, in an education bill attached to the budget, which details how Florida's new restrictions on teaching about racism in higher education should be enforced, is a similar proposal to create a think tank at the University of Florida in Gainesville, the state's flagship higher ed institution. In more explicit terms than the Flagler proposal, the Hamilton Center for Classical and Civics Education at UF would be dedicated to the ideas, traditions, and texts that form the foundations of Western and American civilization. That plan has gotten little attention so far, beyond approving mention in conservative publications like Campus Reform or the College Fix. Governor DeSantis' combative spokesperson, Christina Pushaw, has called it an important part of the administration's crusade to foster, quote, intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity within higher education. So all neutral sounding at the highest levels, but an interesting investigation into what it actually means. Available for you at Salon Magazine to investigate over the weekend, because I'm out of time. That gives, of course, the reason I'm out of time, it's a good thing. It gives Justice Putnam a chance to bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio, and an alternative view of some of the same stories, and an alternative view of what's important via different stories. In fact, I can tell you about what some of them may be after I'm interrupted here.
From netrootsradio.com.
I appreciate this. It's not an interruption.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Now, how about this? Republicans, it turns out, are out of touch with people in their own party who own guns. That should be pretty interesting to hear about. And also on the menu, a newly revealed report puts to rest the right's conspiracy theories about Michael Flynn. Boy, did that case finally explode. Due to Sussman, I think. Stand by.